Well, sometimes it's nice to remain hidden, isn't it? Whether or not you have a phone in your pocket or not. Sometimes it's nice to be a little more rose-minded than crocus-minded, is it not? When you were little, did you ever create those forts in the living room where you got all the sheets and blankets and pillows and piled them up in a precarious kind of tent-like structure? Last week I heard from someone up here, and you kind of went into it with all your favorite books or toys or maybe a teddy bear and just kind of hid out within the safe confines of your home. Did any of you do that? Am I the only one? And DJ? Yes. All right. Actually, Chris, our percussionist, has suggested that we have a fort building night at Throop. All of us like going to Throop Hall and create a huge fort together. And the rain that came on Friday and Saturday, it felt to me a little bit like a nature-inspired fort. I had the benefit of being able to stay inside and create a cozy nest for myself. Maybe some of you were able to do that too. But going back to childhood, maybe some of you played hide and seek with friends. And if so, you might remember that even in the midst of the fun of the game, there was also that little bit of anxiety. The anxiety that was brought on by the very act of hiding. One, you had the desire to discover the very best hiding place ever, the one that no one would think of. You would be the last one to be found. But just as surely as you found that amazing hiding place and you were sitting there waiting, you wondered, is someone actually going to come find me here? Are they going to keep playing the game without me? Have they totally forgotten that I was part of the group that was in this game? Will I sit here forever, become an older person, cramped in the cupboard in the dining room? Well, once we enter adulthood, we may not build forts in our living rooms, or we may. And we may leave behind that game of hide and seek. But many of us find ways to disappear just a little bit. As adults, we get better and better at hiding behind masks of our own creation. We realize that revealing ourselves to the world is risky. Maybe when you're in a crowd, you try to disappear just a little bit in order to conserve energy. Maybe at work you hide your sense of humor or your singing voice or how strong you are because you want to just sink into the shadows a bit and not call attention to yourself. Sometimes our ways of hiding become more extreme and cause serious damage to our physical, emotional, or spiritual selves. Like hiding your opinions because you're worried they won't match the others in the room. Or perhaps hiding emotional pain through alcohol or substance abuse or other harmful behaviors that cover up that pain. Hiding from the chaos and confusion of all that's happening out in our world by literally folding in and shutting out what's happening out there. I'm constantly reminding myself to put my shoulders back and to let my heart shine through. If any of you have a yoga practice, your yoga teacher probably reminds you of that as well. And so your pastor is reminding you of that today, that when you're feeling that, to just kind of put your shoulders back, shine out into the world. There's risk involved in remaining hidden behind a mask, just as there is risk involved in removing it. This past Wednesday night, the sky wore its own veil of clouds, and whenever the clouds drifted apart, there she was. We could see her, the moon, in all of her beautiful fullness. And this particular moon brought with it the Jewish holiday of Purim. At the heart of Purim is the legend of a woman named Esther who wrestled with the risks of hiding behind a mask, of not revealing her true identity. The Jewish scriptures are full of rich symbolism, and the name Esther in Hebrew is Hadassah, which represents righteousness, and it's also derived from a Hebrew word that means hiddenness. And so Esther was a woman who, though she had a very public role as queen, she also had a very big secret. On Purim, the entire book of Esther is read in synagogue. The whole Megillah, you may have heard, that's what they're referring to. And it's full of action and romance and intrigue and adventure, heroes and villains. And since it's a Jewish holiday, there's special food attached to it, a cookie that is named after the villain in the story, Hamantashen. And forgive me, but I'm going to tell you the story in 5 lines. 5 lines approved by our very own Rabbi Jonathan. The king of Persia got upset and had his wife beheaded. To find a new queen, his advisors organized a beauty contest. And there, a young woman, Esther, hid her Jewish identity and sure enough became queen. An evil man, Haman, devised a plot to kill all Jews in the area. And in order to save her Jewish people, Esther revealed her true self to the king, who then had Haman killed. And finally, the Jewish people are saved. They had a big party, and they ate Hamantashen. It goes a little something like that. Revealing her identity came with a big risk. Esther feared for her life. She knew her husband had already murdered one queen. What would he do when he found out that she was Jewish? Would he order her killed? Or would he show her and her people compassion? To save her people, removing her mask was a chance that she had to take. The cost to Esther, had her husband not shown her that compassion and stayed by her side, would have been one of the greatest costs that any of us would pay, that of her life. In our own Unitarian Universalist history, one of our religious ancestors faced a similar dilemma. He took the risk of speaking boldly about religious convictions he held at the cost of his life. Or would he remain quiet, holding on to some semblance of who he was? This ancestor of ours is Michael Servetus, and Servetus carefully and thoughtfully read the Christian scriptures, and as he did so, he became convinced that there was evidence there of the unity of God, and in 1531 he published On the Errors of the Trinity, which outlined his theology. Now, these were still the very early days of the Protestant Reformation. All those reformers were still trying to figure out their place in society and in politics and how they were going to move their ideas forward. They were strategizing. And so rather than being delighted at this young man's brilliant ideas, the church reformers were really critical. They called his work blasphemous and heretical, and he was wanted by the Spanish Inquisition. So in fear for his life, Servetus moved to Paris, changed his name, changed his profession, and he stopped writing for a time in order to simply live. Now, do you guys know any reformers or any street activists in your lives, any organizers? Yeah, so somebody's pointing. So here's the thing, they don't do well being quiet. And neither did Michael Servetus. He could not stay quiet, not even for his life. And so in Paris, under an assumed name, he started writing letters to John Calvin about his theological ideas. Yeah, oops. So John Calvin was on the other side of the Reformation. And as all these letters were coming so quickly, people began looking at them other than John Calvin, and soon the authorities realized the person behind the pen was none other than Michael Servetus. So the French Inquisition chased him all across Europe, all across different borders, trying to arrest him for his anti-Trinitarian ideas. They eventually caught him, tried him, and burned him at the stake for his heretical Unitarian beliefs. Now, this story doesn't have such a happy ending, unlike Esther's, but I'm drawn to our very own Unitarian adventure story filled with action, intrigue, danger, heroes, and villains, lacking a little bit of romance, unfortunately. Maybe we'll write it in our revised history. I love this story because it reminds us that we shouldn't take our chosen faith for granted. People died for the free church tradition we enjoy today. Servetus took a risk. Like Esther, he removed his mask and revealed his true identity in the hopes of saving something dear to him, his beliefs and values. Unlike Esther, he paid the ultimate cost, his life. As we heard in the reading today, wrongs don't work themselves out. Injustices and inequities, they don't just dissolve. Somebody has to stick her neck out. Somebody who cares enough to think through hard ground because she believes and she has something personal and emphatic to say about it. When it comes to the question of how much of yourself are you ready to reveal to the world, my hope is that the consequences you wrestle with are not consequences of life and death. Yet I know that many of you constantly weigh the very real cost in your personal or professional lives if you were to let one or two of your masks slip away, exposing more of the authentic you behind them. We heard one story this morning from Ruth and what it means for her to take a risk with her art and possibly pay a cost of alienating family or other people that she knows in the church. There's a photography project called We Wore the Masks. And the idea behind this particular project is that every day we pass by dozens or hundreds or thousands of people, all wearing masks of some kind that shield who they really are. Underneath those masks are the emotions and characteristics of ourselves that we keep rooted deep inside, underneath the surface and hidden from other people. This project asks the question, if you could choose 2 words that you feel you keep hidden from the world, either because you're afraid to share them or because the world does not allow you to, what would those words be and why? 2 words. The website shows images of individuals with one word of their choosing superimposed over a part of their body. There's one beautiful young white man that has the word imperfect on his shoulder. There's a beautiful black woman who has the word romantic running across her chest. And you see other words like lost, intuitive, fragile, worthy. And there's such vulnerability in each one of those images. If you had to choose just 2 words about your own self that you keep hidden from the world, either because you feel like they wouldn't be validated or because the world isn't quite ready to hear them yet, what would your 2 words be? And what might shake loose in you if you were able to name them? Not out in public, not at the pulpit, not in a newsletter, just to name them first to yourself. And then maybe when you're ready to name it to whoever you call the sacred. And then only when you're ready to share those 2 words with a friend. Unitarian Universalism is a saving faith. In my almost 20 years of directing youth ministry programs, over and over again, I heard teenagers say, Unitarian Universalism saved my life. Most often it was said because for the first time in these teenagers' lives, they felt like they were a part of a community where they could claim whatever their 2 words were. And they could claim them and hold them with dignity. And that's the great promise of our faith, that no matter how well you have hidden, no matter how long you have waited to be found, we are here, supporting you as you consider the risks of vulnerability, the cost of revealing yourself. We are here, ready to take you in. Amen. We sing together our closing hymn, I Wish I Knew How, 151, and please rise.